It's a big day here at Bronze and Modern Gods. I'm John.
And I'm Richard.
And it's a big day because we have a very special guest. You saw it in the description. You saw it on the thumbnail. It is former Marvel Comics editor-in-chief, Jim Shooter, Richard.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Right? Being the big Legion guy you are, I think this might be the day you explode on screen.
Yeah, this is like getting like Luke Skywalker stuck in an elevator with you, and he has to answer
Man,
your questions.
you are a nerd. Really, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Bronze and Modern Gods. If you're watching us on YouTube, why not hit that thumbs up or subscribe? That would be even better. Helps with that algorithm and helps us reach new people just like you. Like we said, we've got Jim Shooter. We've got the underrated books of the week. And we've got our hot book of the week. It's all Shooter all the time, Richard.
Yeah, our hot book this week is Secret Wars number 8. It's the origin of the symbiote suit worn by Spider-Man. If you've seen the black suit that Spider-Man wore, which eventually turns into a villain, this is the origin of that suit. I remember when this book came out. This book was right in the core of my comic book nerddom back in the day, and it was exciting seeing Spider-Man in a new costume. You had no idea the significance of it at the time.
It was really controversial because the company line was, this is going to be permanent. We're not going back. Red and blue webs, they're gone. This is the new streamlined Spider-Man for the 80s. And it was never going to change. And some fans didn't like that. It was a big deal.
It was. Comic book fans don't like change. It's a simple fact. But no, this was a big book, as a part of the Secret Wars storyline, which is one of the most impactful storylines in the 80s. And a lot of things really happen in this title, and it's one of the things I want to talk to Mr. Shooter about today.
You also got 2 Secret Wars figurines out of it. You had the classic costume action figure, and you had the new Spider-Man action figure. What I love is the Mike Zeck art. It's beautiful. He was drawing Captain America at the time, and it was the best Cap had looked in years. Just a very, I don't know, I don't want to call it an 80s glossy chrome flawless type of art approach, but it kind of was, especially when it was teamed with John Beatty as an inker. And boy, Richard, I need an exact number from you. How many times has that cover been homaged?
Oh my God. It has been homaged over and over and over. The one that I think of is the homage where we've got Miles Morales on the cover in his black costume instead of Peter in his.
It's not the pink costume with the hoodie?
It is not the pink costume. Man, I hate that thing. There's a CGC 10 of this book out there.
Wow.
I saw it on GPA. It sold in 2019 for $13,000. I don't know what it would bring if it came to market right now. I think that's a substantial number. This 9/8 sold for $655 last sale. So it's a pricey book, but not out of the reach of most collectors who are looking for books in this era.
If you had $13K to throw around on a comic book, would you buy a Secret Wars 8 in 10.0?
No.
Me neither. I would find other things to buy with it.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'm assuming whoever got that 10, they they're holding onto it, hoping for a huge increase, because that's a big chunk of money to invest in a book.
Or that was a book when they came up that, they remember
Yeah.
buying and treasure it. And now they are a multi-billionaire. Maybe it was Elon. Who knows? I don't know. All right, Richard, it's time. He's here. Our special guest today helped define the silver, bronze, and copper ages of comics, starting at the age of 13 at DC Comics with his scripts for the Legion superheroes. Then, in the late 70s and 80s, reshaping Marvel Comics as its editor-in-chief, laying the groundwork for the multimedia juggernaut it is today. Now, even if he ended his career then and there, he'd go down in history as one of the industry's most important figures. But he didn't stop there, Richard. He went on to be a founder at Valiant Comics At one time, one of the biggest comic book success stories of the 1990s. From there, he helped found Defiant Comics and then Broadway Comics before returning to DC for what I feel is an underrated run on the book that started it all for him, Legion of Superheroes. Have you ever read that run in the 2000s that Jim did?
No, I didn't.
Oh, I know people, including Jim, probably have some issues with the art and things like that, but I enjoyed it. I wasn't even reading Legion. I saw Jim Shooter. I was like, yoink, I'll take that, please. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that our guest is one of the major figures in comic book history. And Richard and I are very proud and excited to welcome to the show Mr. Jim Shooter. Hello.
Hi, guys.
How's that, huh?
That was an amazing intro. I'll tell you, that was great.
All right. Well, we want to thank you very much for being here. We know you don't have to be here and you got things to do and you're a busy guy. So we really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm happy to help.
What are you up to these days? Let's start there.
Well, comic book industry is pretty much contracted. I mean, there's not much to be had there. I do some occasional indie stuff. I'm going to write a story with a guy named Michael Watkins who has a strip called The Guardians. And he's a good guy, he's a good artist, and he's like-minded about telling the story and everything. So that's coming up, and I have kind of a standing offer from Image to do whatever I want, basically.
Really?
Yeah, we're talking about maybe doing a how-to book to start with, and then maybe some fiction. But anyway, I got a lot of stuff that I could be doing, but what I'm really doing right now is I'm working on some Hollywood stuff. I have a couple of things pending, look pretty real to me, but I never believe anything till the check clears. But I've been doing some like script doctor stuff and some concept stuff, and I'm this age. I don't work on spec. I say you pay me, and I own it.
Yeah.
So, and they say okay, and I say, fine, you can have certain rights, and but so it's like wow, it's amazing. It's like a dream, but a lot of my career has been like that. But anyway,
Well, I think you just answered my next question. What happened to your blog? It sounds like you don't have time.
I had a spell there after I finished. I did 4 series for Dark Horse. One was 8 issues, and the others were all 4. And when I came to the end of that, I had some time on my hands. I wasn't really hard pressed at that point, so I was doing some stuff just for myself, just because I wanted to, and I was doing the blog, which my friend Janet Jackson. I told her she should change her name to Sheena Easton or something, but anyway, she calls herself JJ now. But she kind of talked me into that, and she did all the technical stuff because if I can't make my phone work, I've got to find a 5-year-old. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm not good at the high tech stuff. But so we did it for a while, a couple of years, I guess, and it was fun. And I might get back to it because recently the company I work with, not for, with, is Illustrated Media, and they just redid their website, and they also redid my blog, put it back the way I liked it. It had to be changed in the middle because it was moved to a different server or something, and I didn't like the new way, but now that it's back the old way, so I'm happy.
There's a book in there,
Oh yes, yeah, I get that a lot too, and I'm writing something about sort of the industry right now, and that's been often suggested by many people in many ways, and I finally picked a way, and I'm working on it.
Awesome. You touched on something that I want to go back to, and that was the Dark Horse
Uh,
things you were doing, the Gold Key characters. That came and went in a blink. What happened?
well, what happened was Mike got the license to do new material. I guess he had reprint rights before, but he had Mike Richardson at Dark Horse had the rights to do new material, and I had just done a gig that was not fun. the two young men who owned Valiant Entertainment hired me to work for them, and I worked for 7 months, and it just, I don't think they really knew what they wanted to do or how to do it, and they wouldn't listen to me, and it got frustrating because I'm trying to. I said, all right, I'll do this editorial job you offered me, but no writing. All they wanted was me to write. I'm
Oh, wow.
writing presentations and I'm writing stories and I'm writing. And I'm sitting in a room with 5 people who are all talking, trying to type on this little laptop. Hard to do and very frustrating. And like I said, I didn't seem to know where they were going. And so I quit there and I called Mike because I needed a gig. And he said, well, he just got the rights to the Gold Key characters. You want to do it again?
And
And
we're
I said,
talking Magnus, Turok, and Solar.
Magnus, Torok, Solar, and Samson.
Yeah.
And then he wanted to go on from there. He wanted to do Dr. Spectre and some other
Hmm.
things too. And so I actually done some development on those. Anyway, he said to me, Mike's tough. He knows what he's doing, and he wants it a certain way. He said, I want it true to the original. I want it to be, but not Valiant Part Two. He said, I
Mhm.
want it to be all new, but true to the original. And I said, all right, I can do that. And so when I went at it with kind of a different mindset than I did with Valiant, and made it, I think, different. I liked it better.
They
But
were great. I thought that's why
yeah.
I was shocked they didn't last.
Well, the thing was at that time, piracy in the industry was at all time high. Mike's books were free online before they left the printer. Yeah,
Wow.
somebody was in there was stealing his stuff and putting it online. Somebody at the printer was
Oh,
doing this,
wow.
and it was very frustrating because it really hurt his sales. It was hurting everybody's sales. Other companies lie about it, but no, it was hurting their sales. And then he had this license, which was very expensive, and he had me. I'm expensive, and he wanted to have these wonderful painted covers on every
Mhm.
issue, and that's expensive. And so, all in all, just it was too much to do, too big a deal, and then when it wasn't selling great, and I was selling fine, but not for with all the what it cost.
Yeah.
So so he finally said, let's just finish the first several runs and then call it a day until I think up something better. So it's okay, and and we I see him once in a while. He's in New York. We'll go have breakfast or something, and he's a good guy. And I think if I ever had some idea, I could pitch to him if I wanted to, or if he wanted something from me, he knows he can always call me.
Awesome. So many parallels between comics and the music industry because that's what I
Yes.
do. And we were hit by piracy the same time. We had people at the CD plants taking digital files and putting them right up on Napster. So I
Mhm.
completely relate to that story. But let's go back to the beginning. Richard, you have a story to tell.
Yeah, my I'm a man of certain age, late 50s. And when I was growing up and I was a young kid, my father hung out at barbershops. He took me to the barbershop. That was the socialization point.
Yeah, the clubhouse. It
Yeah,
often is. Yeah.
but I'm a kid. I don't relate with these adults as they're talking. So I would sit there, and the barber had a stack of comic books on the shelf. Things like Commandy and more importantly, old adventure comics.
Oh,
Specifically, the Legion, and I read those books partially because that's what all I had to do. I read those books backwards and forwards. Later, my father bought me a stack about yay high of adventure comics. They were coverless, they were well read, and I literally shredded those books. I read them so many times.
I did
Um,
that to my early Marvels.
so I have a inset love for the Legion, and especially the Legion from your era, I can't imagine, Legion, Adventure Comics number 346, which was the first issue that you did. You penciled it and you also wrote it and got it published by DC at 13. That
Not
is
not
amazing.
not quite penciled. I mean, basically, I was 13, so I'm not going to be drawing as well as Kurt Swan or somebody, what I did though is I did very comprehensive layouts. I
Okay.
wanted them to know. I mean, I didn't know what a comic book script looked like, so I just made it look like a comic book. And I did a cover, designed a cover for it. I colored the cover with my colored pencils because I wanted to know exactly what I wanted. But the layouts were, the storytelling was good enough, and the way he talked about it was his visual thinking. He's
Mhm.
good visual thinking. Okay, and it was good enough. And those older artists, they respected the kids' layouts. They would do what I asked them to do. These are like Grandmaster Hall of Fame, all time great guys. And they're listening to the kid. Oh, and P.S. When I made a mistake, when I did something wrong, they'd fix it and then explain it to me.
Mhm.
And so I learned. I got got trained, and so I did the layouts, and they liked them. The artists liked them, made the work easier, and couldn't draw well enough. But then they got this newfangled cover artist, and his first job at DC Comics was doing covers for my sketches. He was this guy named Neil Adams, who knew. And so I mean, but he liked my sketches, and he used to encourage me, and he liked my visual sense. And uh, I'll tell you one little coda to that story if you want.
Sure.
The years later, when I was doing that run on the Legion that you were talking about, John, the in the 2005ish, I
Yeah.
guess, yeah. Uh, uh, when Neil heard that I was writing the Legion again, he called Mike Martz, the editor, and he said, Mike, Jim's doing Legion. I want to do a variant cover for you. And Mike said, great, terrific. He says, one condition: Jim does the sketch.
Is that the audacity of youth, though? That you
Well,
could.
I didn't know any better. I was too dumb to be afraid. I just did the best I could.
That is, well, how did it feel to go to the newsstand and pick up the comic that you created, right then, back then when you're 13?
Well, it felt great, and I have a funny story about that too. Had a friend. I lived in Pittsburgh. I had a friend whose father was a big shot at Alcoa Aluminum, and he used to travel to South America a lot, on business. And so he knew his son's buddy had something to do with comics. And so he came back from one of his trips once from the Dutch Suriname at the time, and he said, "Oh, hey, I brought you a comic book." He says, "Too bad you can't read it. It's in Dutch." I said, "No problem. I wrote it." It was Superman 199. It was the one with the Superman Flash race.
Oh,
And I said,
wow.
"Yeah, no problem. I wrote it."
Nice. Nice.
One
Oh,
of
that's
life's
great.
little victories.
Do you
That was
still have
cool.
it? Do you still have the Dutch version?
Yes,
Oh,
yes, I still have
excellent.
it.
Good. Those foreign
Okay.
variants are worth a lot now.
Yeah.
Oh, they're priceless to me.
Yep.
And one more Legion question. Legion, or Adventure Comics 352 and 353, which was the introduction of the Fatal Five and the Sun Eater. It's so prototypical of some of the villains that we see nowadays, and super villain teams. Um, that's one of my favorite storylines from the Legion.
Thanks. Thanks.
Um, Specifically, Feral Lad, he dies in 353, and not only dies, he doesn't comic book die. Like how many times has Superman died, or
Yeah.
he expires, and there is a statue raised in his honor. Was that intentional? Did you really just want him to be the end of that particular character?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, I found it. They didn't often do character deaths back in those days. In the Legion, they killed Lightning Lad, but he got better. And it's just like it was so. I thought, no, dead is dead. And so when I decided that I wanted to kill Farrellet, uh, I made sure I planned. I had an upcoming issue where I showed his ghost, you know, and then I had a future issue, 20 years in the future, where his statue stands in the Hall of Fallen Heroes or something
Mhm.
like that. And so I want, it said he's dead now. He's dead 20 years from now. Of course, that doesn't keep other writers from bringing him back, later. Or I think first he had an unknown twin brother. I hate that. It's like, I really hate it when they do that. And then, um, and then if they brought him back actually, I thought, well, I'm gone. That's their character. They can do what they want.
I'd like to take this moment to introduce my heretofore unknown twin. Come in, John.
No, I tell you, the fact that he died was so impactful to me because the Legion had
Yeah.
death. There was consequence to actions, and
Yeah,
that was important.
you're running around the universe, getting into all these giant battles and stuff like that. Does anybody ever get hurt, or
Mhm.
does somebody die? So I thought that was just part of the making it more real or lifelike.
Right.
It just and I wanted to do that. And actually, it was since it was one of the new characters I created, there was not much discussion about it, and more thought that was all right.
Was
And the
that
reason
you?
huh?
Was that you responding to what was happening at Marvel Comics at the time?
No.
No.
Did they kill somebody at Marvel?
Oh, like Wonder Man and Avengers
Oh,
9.
they didn't really kill him.
Yeah.
He wasn't really dead. Um, but no, that was killing people was not usual in those days, and certainly not any major characters. But yeah, and the reason I picked Farrell at is because our original plan for him is that someday he would take the mask off and he would be African American.
Oh, wow.
He'd
Okay.
have he'd have brown skin, and no one would bat an eye. They wouldn't make any. They got a green guy. They got blue people. They got orange people. Who cares? And by 1,000 years in the future, they've figured this out,
Right.
right? So it was just going to be like just casual. Nobody cared. It was no big deal at all. No, wasn't discussion. No discussion. Not mentioned. Nothing. And which is exactly what Stan did with the Black Panther.
Mhm.
It wasn't at all about race or skin color. It was about a noble guy who was a heroic. He was king of his own country. He was holy cow. So I would have done it the way Stan did it, or he did it the way I was going to do it. Let's put it that way, because mine would have come out several months before his.
Mhm.
Mm.
And
Wow.
but my editor said no. He
Uh,
said, no, you can't do that. I said, why not? He said, we'll lose our distribution in the South. That's a quote. What? I,
hmm.
I was just, I was so frustrated. And I'd set this up, like I said, I had a masked character. It's
Mhm.
part of his armor. It's not he didn't have a ruined face or anything. He just was, that was part of his armor. And then one day he takes the thing off, and it's no big deal. And nobody ever bats an eye. And the way to do it wrong, I'm sorry. Um, Kerry Bates did the tie rock,
Yeah.
and he made it all about race, and it's
But they had their own planet.
or their own island or something. I
Yeah.
don't.
It was
Yeah.
literally
Which
segregation in
I
the
mean,
third
it was just it's like, oh, get over it. It's 1,000 years in the future. It's let's make it a positive future. They figured this out,
Mhm.
Right.
and that
And,
there's no problem with orange skin, blue skin, whatever you got. It doesn't matter.
right. Right. The
It
Legion was all about equality because there's so many different races that, it was like Green Lantern Corps. It
yeah,
was
I mean, yeah,
never
exactly.
focused.
And I guess that was well before Green Lantern Corps, wasn't it?
Oh
Mhm.
I
yeah,
don't.
sure. For
But
sure.
no, anyway, that was my plan. I wanted to do that, and they wouldn't let me. So I thought, well, at least let me give him a noble death.
Mhm.
We've touched upon really early Marvel comics a couple times already. You in the 70s as editor in chief of Marvel, you've said this on your blog too. You would always have work for Kirby and Ditko and Heck because they were
Absolutely,
founding fathers, right?
you betcha.
And now here's where the question gets really geeky and granular. Is that why Machine Man was revived to give Ditko regular work?
No,
It just was
no,
it was a seller. It sold okay when Kirby was
oh
on it.
no. It when Jack was doing his last 3 years at Marvel. He started in the middle of 1975. Contract ran to the middle of 78. I took over on the first working day of 1978. But whole time that I was there, I started in the first working day of 76.
Mm.
And when I came in the door, Jack was back at Marvel, and it was not popular. I mean, some of the guys in the office loved this stuff, but the sales were terrible.
Mm.
And I found out that Jack had a clause in his contract. He was technically the editor of his own work, but that was just to protect him from some crazy person ruining things.
Yeah.
And so, but the people before me, they took it kind of literally. They said, "Man, screw it. We don't have to even have to look at it." So there's these books of his, the early ones, are going out with every sentence ending with six exclamation points and
Yeah.
stuff like that, and misspellings and things. I thought, no, wait a minute. He's the king. He needs some respect here. And so I was the editor. When I came in '76, I was the line editor. I edited all the comics. I was the hands-on guy, and I reported to the editor in chief. And the editor in chief largely, in those days, didn't have much to do with editing the comics. He sort of presided and designed the covers and wrote the bullpen page, I guess. But so I started when Kirby every week a Kirby book would come in. He did 4 books a month, pencil and script,
Oh,
and they
wow.
scripted right on the
Yeah.
board. You'd put just letter in balloons, just sort of like I did when I was a kid. Um, and so the books would come in, and you'd take the thing out of the envelope, and the whole room would smell like cigar smoke. Made me very popular. But anyway, so I'd go over them, and when I was done marking them up, or making my notes, I'd call him, and I must have spent 3 to 5 hours a week on the phone with this guy, every week,
Mhm.
because I wanted to do what I could for her, and make it as good as I could. The first question I always asked him, I said, "Jack, would you mind if I took out some of these exclamation points?" And he'd always say, "You do that, young man." And so I would, and then I'd go over things, and I'd find places where I thought it could be smoother, or maybe I could help him get across what he was trying to get across better, or just he'd forget things sometimes, make mistakes, but there was nothing major. But so I'd try to help him, and at the end of every conversation, he always thanked me for helping him, the
Mhm.
king. Okay. And so, I mean, I did the best I could, but at that time, Jack's popularity had hit a real bottom. I mean, it was at its nadir. When he gone to DC after leaving Marvel, that stuff was revolutionary in many ways, but it didn't do well,
Right.
and that's why DC was not interested in all at renewing his contract.
Uh-huh.
But Marvel, because of Stan, they were loved to have him back, and I guess Jack needed a gig. It wasn't exactly a love affair with Marvel at that point, but he needed a gig, and so he came back, and he took a 3 years contract. But I say nobody was paying much attention in the office until me,
Yeah.
and the books out on the stands. I think the fans had gotten the idea that this is it looks old fashioned, looks kind of unusual, and I think some of them even thought it was reprints.
Uh,
So that was all newsstand sales in the day, and newsstand, you send out a bunch of copies, and you have a certain percentage of sell through, right?
uh-huh.
And so at that time, when most Marvel books were selling through about 50%, Jacks were selling
Mm.
single digits, some of them, and that's not good. And but I tried to help them. I think we did pick up the sales picked up a little bit toward the end, but that was a really bad time for
Well,
Jack and for comics.
you can
After
tell when you come on though and help him. You really can tell as a Kirby acolyte right
Yeah,
here
just
because
count the exclamation points. I mean,
the
but
covers, all of a sudden you have Terry Austin inking him. You have Bob Wyacek inking him, whereas before it was Royer, Royer, Royer. Now you have some variety in it, and it kind of contemporized it a little bit.
yeah, that was good. I think Archie was the first one to start getting that done. and that was fine with me. I was okay with that. Um, and Jack, toward the end of the time there, I think I don't know what. I guess he realized we were trying to, build a success, help him, and I think he softened on the Royer must ink everything rule, and it was
Right.
Royal and what, D.
D.
Bruce
Bruce
Berry,
Berry, which
yeah, D. Bruce
no,
Berry. The
no
reason
thank
they did it is because he made a deal with him that they would return all the artwork to him. Whereas if
Mhm.
he had someone like Frank Giacoia do it, well, then Giacoia was entitled to some pages, and Jack
Right.
didn't want that. So
Oh,
anyway,
that's interesting. All right, time for the geekiest question of the hour. We had Chuck Rosansky from Mile High, who you know well,
yes,
um, and we went through this with him, and we got his uh, confirmation. We want yours because out of Ed Shukin, is that how you pronounce his name? The
Ed
circulation.
Schuken, yeah, he was the circulation director.
He's
Yeah,
probably the only other person that is going to know this more than you two. There are fans out there that insist that the Whitman reprints, and I'm using reprints in quotes because some people insist they are not reprints, that they are just a black plate change. They were early direct market books. And we say no. The direct market started in April 1979 officially. What
well,
is the official
yeah,
word?
about that, yeah, yeah. No, Whitman was a plate change.
It was
I
so they
mean,
were printed the same time as the regular book.
absolutely, of
There you
course.
go.
I mean, they weren't going to go back and do a second run for the small number of Whitman copies.
Right.
This is a plate change, and they changed that. On those days, the print runs are big enough, and you're printing letterpress, so the plates wear out quickly, and so you need to replate anyway. And so we had a couple of replatings there. I think that Whitman was one. Might have
UK
been
would
around.
have to be another.
Yeah, maybe. So
Yeah.
anyway, but that was no big deal. We just replated and marched on. Um,
But those
but
Whitmans never leaked to the direct market.
hell no.
The early, yeah.
No,
Take that, everybody.
that's
You heard
total
it.
fiction. That's ridiculous. I
All
mean,
right.
yeah, Chuck knows that,
Yep.
and I hope he said the same thing I'm
He
saying.
confirmed the same thing you're saying. Absolutely.
Yeah,
100%.
well, the thing is, it's Chuck and I, between us, we probably know almost everything that happened back then because I know it from the inside, and he knows it from the outside, the distributor retailer side. And so every once in a while, he'll tell me something I didn't know that, and a lot of times I'll tell him what the reality was in house
Mhm.
Right.
and in the industry. I had I had an interesting point of view because I was a creative guy. I was the editor in chief, and I was a vice president. So I was
Yep.
part of the executive staff. So I was like privy to a lot of stuff upstairs. It cracks me up when I read these interviews with guys and they're talking about the Marvel's smoke-filled boardroom where all the executives are deciding how we're going to deal with get rid of these creeps at First Comics. A, we didn't have a boardroom. B, none of the executives had ever opened a comic book, and they wouldn't know what First Comics was. If you told, it's like one time the president of the company was being deposed for some lawsuit, and he was asked to name uh, uh, three comic book companies, and he couldn't.
No.
He was asked to name five Marvel characters, and he starts off with Conan. You know, and he couldn't do it. It was like he gets to Conan, Star Wars, and maybe X Men. Oh yeah, Spider Man. Yeah,
He
I mean,
doesn't
he really he was helpless with stuff. He had never opened a book, and the licensing lady, she calls me up all excited. Why call me? There's a stairway, and her office is like 30 feet away, right? And but the people upstairs, they didn't come down to our floor. That was the creative floor. I was almost all my guys, and they were afraid to come down there because it was like the jungle and it was scary, dangerous creatures there. You don't know what's going to happen. And so they would call me from right up there, rather than come down and see me. Anyway, she calls me up one day and "Oh, I'm so excited! I just made the greatest deal for Wonder Woman." I said, Gail, we don't own Wonder Woman." "What do you mean we don't own Wonder Woman?" I said, "That's DC. Call what's her face over there and tell her you teed up a deal." You know, and so lie to her. So anyway, she was so furious because she'd apparently made a very rich deal, and
Mm.
And then the lady in charge of promotions, who I think her main job was getting the costume characters to the White House Easter egg roll. I don't know what else she did, but maybe she did something. I don't know.
They
But
would come to our local mall too.
she called me up one day, and she says, "Hey Jim, how many stories are in each comic book?" I said, well, how many do you think, Nancy? And she says, so 4 or 5, you know. I said, no, it's one, and they're continued. She says, only one? I said, Nancy, read one someday. You know, find out who you're representing. You
She
know,
was an Archie.
oh God, I mean, I think she read the Harvey books back when there were these little like 4-page Casper stories and stuff. I
Right.
don't.
You
I,
bring up a
I,
really good you bring up a great point though. Do you feel some sort of vindication now? Because at the time the narrative was you came in and you made all these changes and you had a firm editorial hand. And that is the norm
and
now.
it's baloney too. I mean,
Right.
I tried. My goal was to try to get good creators and help them do their thing. I was uh, the backstop. I mean, if somebody wanted to do something that I was just totally off the wall, I would occasionally say no,
Mhm.
and that's why some of these guys don't like me. John Byrne didn't like to hear the word no, and so I mean, but I basically I did not micromanage. I didn't tell guys write like this or do this. I want this storyline, or I never. I just I made sure it was a guy like Walt Simonson,
Yep.
and I checked on what he did, because even Walt could make a mistake. But all that stuff with Thor, that's him. My
Well,
contribution to that was telling the editor, uh, I said, the sales are falling on Thor. We need to do something. It's really not cooking here. And he said, everything you can do with Thor has already been done. And I said, I should fire you right now, because if you think that way, I said, you can't work here.
right.
And he said, well, no, what I mean is that, so he starts spreading word that I'm looking to improve Thor. And so I get a call from Walt. He called me, and he said, I'll do it. And I said, let's see. Walt Simonson. Okay. You know, so anyway, he told me what he was gonna do, and I thought it was rocking. What do you mean there's nothing left to do with Thor? Walt open new worlds. I mean, and he
Yeah.
didn't want to reboot it. He didn't want to start from number one. Not that I would have let him anyway.
Right.
But he just made it good. He made it
Uh,
good.
Excellent.
Frank Miller, Roger McKenzie, Daredevil, same thing.
Yeah. Roger, yeah, Frank especially took it to. I mean, it was our number 2 book, and then not by much, against the X-Men. Um, but yeah, I mean, nobody was micromanaging Frank. We made sure he didn't go too far off the rails, and he never did. But you get good people, and you know, I mean, every once in a while, Claremont, the sound of his own wheels would drive him crazy or something, and he'd want to do something. And a couple of times I had to say, I don't think so, Chris.
And one time you stepped in is probably the held up as the greatest X-Men story ever, and that's the Dark Phoenix saga.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Chris has been dining out on this story about that evil Jim Shooter made me kill Phoenix for years. But I mean, Chris and I are friends. I wrote his introduction to the Hall of Fame. Okay, and he worked for me at Defiant. I mean, it's not like we were. Well, we always were arguing. It's
Right.
always arguing. And so with the Phoenix thing, the story started out. She was supposed to become a bad guy and stay that way. I told him, this is my contribution. We're having lunch, and he's trying to think up a storyline. And I think it was Jim Salicrup, it was me, Jim Salicrup, and Chris. And so he's like stuck for something to do. And I said, hey, Chris, I said, Marvel's had a lot of bad guys who became good guys, like
Mhm.
Hawkeye, Black Widow, Swordsman. I said, we've never had a good guy go bad and stay that way. He says, don't say another word. I don't want another word. I'm like, he says, I'm going to do it all myself.
Mm.
I want it to be my story. I want him to do it all myself. I respect that. That's great. I like writers who have that kind of feeling. Who else did? Archie Goodwin,
Mhm,
me,
mhm,
Stan. And
mhm,
so anyway, I like that. I thought that was noble of him. So he starts on this storyline. I guess he and Byrne worked on it together. I guess. I mean, mostly Chris, I would assume. And it was going along. It was getting more and more intense. And I'm thinking, wow, this is getting really intense. By that time, Louise Simonson was the editor, and I don't think she really knew how it started, how the whole project started, and so, or she knew what Chris told her, which might not have been spot on. And so Louise thinks it's pretty good. It's going along. And so I went to her and I said, "Hey, Louise, I want to know how this story ends." I said, "What do you have?" And she said, "Well, I got 2 issues in progress and I've got the plot for the last one." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, let me see." And so I looked it over and it's just getting more and more intense. It's building and building and building.
mhm, mhm.
And then I read the plot for the last issue where he just totally cops out. The Shiar fix her brain. She's fine again. She goes back to Westchester and, is a regular X-Man. You know, I say, no, whoa, 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 whoa. You don't just blow up a planet and then say, it's okay now. I was sick that day.
Right, right.
You can't, you don't blow up a starship full of people. I mean, the relatives of those people are going to be a little peeved, don't you think?
Yeah.
And just like, oh, I'm fine now. It's okay. It's like taking the German army away from Hitler and letting him live on Long Island. No, no. So he said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" And I said, "Well, maybe she goes to galactic prison or something." He says, "No, the X-Men would keep trying to rescue her." I said, "Not on my watch, pal. That baloney." I said, "But all right, now it's your turn. You think of something." And so the next morning he comes in, he stands at my door, he crosses his arms, says, "I'm gonna kill her." I said, "Deal. You do that right, that's a good ending."
Bluff
And he's like,
called.
"What do you mean? You can't kill her." I said, "I'm not killing her. You're killing her." So we're in this stupid argument. But he has revised that, over time to be that I ordered him to kill Phoenix. No, you volunteered, pal. It was you.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, he did a documentary once. He was sitting next to Louise, and he starts they had asked me the same question for the documentary, and I told him what really happened. And then they asked the same question to Chris, see what he would say, and separately, we're
Mhm.
interviewed separately. He asked the same question to Chris, and so he starts on the evil Jim Shooter thing, and Louise turns to him and she points at his face. She says, "Chris, you know it was your idea," and he has to admit it. He's like, live on camera. He has to admit it. So
Man.
that was like one of life's little victories there. And like I say, Chris and I, we see each other all the time, and if we do, we're right back to bantering about this and that. It's
Yeah.
normal.
Phoenix had to die. She killed the asparagus people.
Yes, but
But
Chris is a great guy, and I'm telling you, I made them do a good ending,
Yeah.
and boy, did they do it! Oh
oh, it
man,
was amazing.
knocked
It
it
was
out of the
amazing.
park. That
You
issue
know,
is incredible.
I was buying them off the newsstand and reading it the day that I got it, and then had to wait 29 days for the next issue.
Torture.
It was torture. But
And we
that
that
whole
means
era.
we got yeah,
Oh yeah, you had me hook, line, and sinker. Then
yeah. That's
it
good.
set me as an X-Men fanatic for
That's
life.
that's that's me when I was a kid, and I'm reading Stan and Jack and Steve's stuff. I just couldn't wait to find out what happened. I wanted
Oh,
to know what was going on with Spider-Man next month. You know,
oh, absolutely. And so you had a 9-year tenure as at editor in chief, and
it's more like 10 actually, because I started at the beginning of '78, and I left. Technically, I was fired in April.
okay,
However, my contract went on, and I was still doing stuff for Marvel till the end of the year. They fired me and then sent me on a promotional tour in the UK. I designed a float and a balloon for the Macy's parade. I did an appearance at the World Science Fiction Con in the fall, and some other stuff. I mean, I was consultant, so I was still there. I just wasn't in the office anymore running the books. That's all.
sure. But during that time, you did the Fantastic Four came out. Um, Frank Miller's run of Daredevil, Walt Simonson's run of Thor, Roger Stern's run of the Avengers and Spider
Yes.
Man.
Oh
Did you
yes.
Did you feel how important it was? It important during the time that all that was going on? Did you get the sense of how impactful that time was for Marvel in general?
I knew we were doing something good. I mean, I got the greatest people you could get,
Mhm,
and it helped that the rest of the industry was collapsing because the streets were awash with unemployed talent.
Mhm.
But so I was able to get first the great editors. I got Archie Goodwin to come back. He's the best of all time. I got Warren went out of business, so I was able to get Louise. That's
mhm,
like better than Christmas, you know. I got DC had their implosion, and they ended up laying off or firing a lot of people. I ended up getting Larry Hama, and then and other people too. We were getting other people all along, like Carl Potts. Are you kidding me? And Bob Budiansky. I mean, the Transformers guy. I mean, and he could genius, could do anything. And we got, and then we started because of Louise's era. Before that, it was mostly guys who showed up for jobs. I mean, hardly ever a woman showed up. I think maybe Mary Jo once. I don't know, but um, all of a sudden, because Louise is there, I guess people are saying, well, how bad could it be? Louise is there, and so we actually started getting uh, a wider variety of individuals, and a lot of talented people. We had Ann Nesenti, for instance, genius. I mean,
Underrated. Who takes over from Frank Miller and makes it her own?
you
mhm,
bet. And also she did that long shot book
Yeah.
and a bunch of
mhm.
other stuff. Well, she was started as my secretary. She's a lousy secretary. And I said, Ann, I thought you knew what you were doing. And she says, well, no, I just wanted to get in the door because I really, really want to be a writer. I said, well, show me something you've written. She said, I don't have anything appropriate. I said, well, pick a character, any character, write me a story, right? So at that time, Marvel was publishing Smurfs. So she picked Smurfs. All right. And she wrote this Smurf story. And I'm reading it, and it's really good. And I'm like, wow, this is the best Smurf story ever written. And I took it to Louise needed an assistant at that time. Her assistant had gone freelance or getting promoted, or I don't know what. Anyway, so I went and I showed her this story, and she reads. She says, "This is really good." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Ann Nesenti wrote this." She's Ann. I said, "Yeah." I said, "Look, I understand you're looking for an assistant editor. Maybe you consider Ann, because I let everybody hire their own. I didn't interfere with that stuff." And so Louise said, "Well, I don't want to steal your secretary." I said, "Oh no, go ahead, steal her." "Oh yeah, yeah, no, really, please." And so Ann went to work, and now she had Ann is being trained by Louise. I mean, that's you can't do better.
Right.
It was great. And Mary Jo Duffy was trained by Archie. And so all of a sudden we're getting all this talented people, and it's funny. You make a good opportunity, open the door wide, and make a sincere attempt at it, and diversity happens.
Mhm.
I'd never even heard that word before used in that context. But all of a sudden, I got all this great crew, and everybody bringing something different to it. And it's
I
just
want to give you credit
beautiful.
for one of my favorite writers too, Jim Owsley, aka Christopher Priest.
Yeah, he started out as a high school intern. I mean, he was like, one of the high school kids that come in and they, go make copies or go get coffee or, I mean, they go for people.
Mhm.
And so he starts coming in on roller skates because he's always having to skate down the hall to go to the photocopy. And I thought it's comic book company, it's fine. It was a really good thing that the people from upstairs didn't come down to our floor because any of them had seen that they'd have been thrown a fit about the insurance and some stuff. I didn't care. It's like he's a good skater. He'll do fine. Um, but he was really bright and really creative. And um, when he graduated from high school, he applied for. We had an opening for assistant editor. He applied, and I can't remember which editor it was, but whoever it is, they asked me, you know, what do you think of hiring this guy? I said, he's one of the smartest people ever to walk through our doors. I think, give him a shot. And so they did, and he really just blossomed. He really he got good. He got dangerous. The only thing he wasn't good at was all the bureaucratic stuff, keeping the schedules and things like that. Because they did promote him to editor, and as long as he had an assistant who was good at that, he was tremendous. But then when he didn't have an assistant who was kind of a detail guy,
Mhm.
uh, then things started to fall off. the tracks. And I called him in my office. I said, Jim, I got to fire you. And he said, thank you. He said, thank you. Ask him. He, and so I said, but it's like getting a raise because now, because he had started doing some writing. I said, but
Right.
now you can write full time. You'll make more money.
Yeah.
I'm firing you into a raise. You're being fired upward. And he was pleased because that's what he really wanted to do.
Yeah.
He wanted to do creative. He didn't want to have to worry about schedules and you know hunting down artists and things like that. He didn't want to do that.
Best move for him. I mean, after your time, his Black Panther run is amazing. Uh,
Yes.
just so
Yep.
many things coming
He
out of
did
it.
Quantum and Woody for
Oh,
Valiant after I left there. He did a whole bunch of really just innovative,
hmm.
really kind of crazy good stuff.
uh, I'm a huge fan of your Star brand, believe it or not.
No, thank you.
As we all know, you left Marvel just as that book was building up and gaining steam. Do you remember any of your future plans for that book?
Oh,
Who was
sure.
the
I remember
who was the old
everything.
man? Who was the old man?
Well,
You're gonna give it away?
sort of. I mean,
Okay.
he becomes the enemy, because he's and I didn't want to have the Green Lantern Corps. I didn't want to have populated with all kinds of aliens and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But the Star Brand is the greatest weapon in the universe, and so you have to find the right guy who can not misuse it and defend it.
Mhm.
And my biggest plans with him were to do like he's like it was Superman level. I mean, he was that strong, and so I thought, well, as people start to become aware of him, nobody's just going to say, "Oh, it's nice we have Superman,"
Mhm.
and he's saving falling airplanes. No, I mean, I'm telling you, what would really happen if there was a guy who, on a bad mood day, decided to sink the Seventh Fleet? I mean, the government wouldn't just say, "Oh, well, he's probably okay." I mean, they'd be working constantly on their anti-Starbrand program and secret underground labs and stuff. Every country in the world would. I
Uh-huh.
mean, they'd be afraid of him plenty. And it wasn't the small level where Jonah Jameson was trying to get people to be afraid of Spider-Man. I mean, he is a existential threat
Mhm.
unless he's a really good guy. And so I had this evolution plan for him where, at first he's kind of just an ordinary guy and he's as much of a jerk as anyone else. And he grows into it.
Yeah.
He learns and he grows into it, and he becomes very cautious, and he knows the government, that almost everything that communication with them is some kind of trap.
Mm.
But they're his source for where help is needed, and he picks and chooses, and he keeps his distance, and he's very cautious and very careful. He doesn't want, the whole reason for secret identities back in the day got lost someplace. And
Mhm.
the thing was, if they know who your friends are, they'll go
Mm.
after you.
Right.
So uh,
And we
I
saw
made
that
that
with
real.
the
I made
we
that
saw that.
real. I made it. Anyway, I was sorry. That's where I was going with it. And the nice thing about Starbrand is that I had tremendous art because they took all our budget away. We didn't have any money. I couldn't get guys because if you can't guarantee royalties, how are you going to get Walt Simonson to leave Thor and do something that
Right.
may not make it, or lose income on it, They just so we ended up having whoever couldn't get work that week, and you look at the credits, you see awful lot of assistant editors in there. Why? Because they took away my entire budget, and I was
Mm.
told to do it on staff, and I'm like, how am I going to do this? And so those people were volunteers who
Yeah.
worked for
Wow.
free to help me. All right. And I have to hand it to them. They did some pretty good stuff. The other guy who really was the champion was Archie. Archie
Mhm.
Goodwin. He came to my rescue. I think he created 4 of those 8 characters.
Yeah. Right.
Uh,
Trust
yeah,
us around.
yeah. And anyway, I mean, So okay, we're not having any luck getting artists or writers. I mean, Archie wrote a few books, but he wasn't fast, so he couldn't do much. And I wrote Starbrand and did the best I could. But the thing is, like as we're getting ready to get going on the first, I've written the story for the first issue. Um, uh, John Romita Jr. comes walking into my room, and he says, "Can anybody draw your book?" And I said, "No." And he said, I want to draw it." I said, "John, what do you want? Iron Man, X-Men? What do you want?" I said, "You're making good money. Trust me. This is dead on the ground." I said, "This is we don't have the money. We don't have the support." I said, this is doomed to failure." I said, "So stay where you are, you know, and keep doing that as well as you do it." And he says, "No, I want to draw your book." And I'm like, "You're crazy." Anyway, but he argues. And so I finally said, "All right, okay, at least I have world class pencils." Later
Exactly.
that day, Al Williamson calls me. He says, "Hey, here, JR's drawing your book. I want to ink it." I said, "You guys
Beautiful.
are out of your minds." But, but out of their minds or not, I had world class art on that book.
Mhm.
I did world class art because they were trying to help me. They were doing me a favor, and so that was good. And I had all this stuff planned. Where I'll tell you one evil plan of mine that came to fruition is it starts off with him meeting somebody who's apparently is a close encounter of the third kind,
Right.
and and I mean, if that happened to me, I'd be suspicious, and did that really happen? And no, maybe it was just anyway. I'd struggle with the concept. So what I did was I looked in the yellow pages and I found a phone number that alleged to be for NASA. So I called him and I play acted and I said, I just gotta tell somebody about this thing. I was like hiking, and I came across this guy, and I'm telling him the literal story of Starbrand.
Right.
And the guy, I can tell he's just barely keeping from laughing. First of all, the NASA number, it's a recruiting office. Second, and he says, "Hold on a minute." And I just as he's starting to laugh, he puts me on hold. So finally, it wasn't him that comes there. I guess it was his commanding officer, who at least was a little more respectful. I mean, thought he was talking to a lunatic, which he
Mhm.
was. But he said, "Look," he said, "we used to have Project Blue Book," and
Mhm.
he said, "We abandoned that years ago, but the whatever university in Colorado Springs, Colorado State, maybe, I
Not
think."
sure.
He said, "They've taken that program over." He said, "We transferred all of our records and stuff to them, and they're on a much lower scale. They continue to look into all these things." He said, "You should call there." He gave me a number. Oh,
Hmm.
so I called there, right? And I told the guy the story. And unlike the Air Force guy, he was sympathetic.
Oh,
Well, he said, we do get a lot of stories like yours. He said, and he said, honestly, he said, most of them are just fables. That's just they're not real. He said, but if you have documentation, or if you can present some evidence, we'd love to see it.
Mhm.
And I said, all right. I said, I'll keep that in mind. Well, then I went and wrote my comic book, but 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 I mean, I wanted to see what would happen, so I actually played that scene out in Starbrand.
Oh,
I had him call and get laughed at and so forth.
yeah. I
Yeah,
remember that.
yeah, yeah.
Richard,
So I was trying to make it as good as I could, as real as I
yeah,
could.
it was great. I mean, you even have Debbie getting threatened by the old man, and that really brings home what you were saying about the need for a secret identity,
Yeah,
which before it was, oh, I just don't want Lois to fall in love with me.
yeah,
There were real stakes in there.
I
Richard,
yeah.
you have a funny story here.
this is I did research for this, and I came across this um, claim to be a fact. Jim Shooter wrote a Dazzler film treatment, working in the roles for Cher, Rodney Dangerfield, Kiss, Robin Williams, Donna Summer, and the Village People.
Village People, also Lenny and Squiggy.
Lenny and the Squid Tones, and I know why. They were all Casablanca Records artists, right?
That's right. That's right. Because what Alice Donenfeld, our genius, wonderful company counsel and business affairs vice president, um, she saw things that Archie was doing, like Josie and the Pussycats and the Archies, and she said, "Well, why can't we do that? And we'll do it better." And so she asked me to develop a musical character. So I wasn't exactly hip to the current music scene, but John Romita Jr. was. So I got him involved, and I think a couple other people, because like I said, it was a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but so I wanted to get input. And among us, between us, we developed this character, the Dazzler. And I'll tell you, uh, at the time, it was the Disco Dazzler because disco was it. It was the hottest thing. Uh, and I think John Romita Jr. was the only one who actually been in a disco. So anyway, so we developed this character, and Casablanca loved it. And we quickly, it was our idea, but we quickly just called her Dazzler, just to not get dated here.
Uh-huh.
And so anyway, they were really into the idea. They liked it. So the way the Archies and everything works is you have some entertainment, cartoons or comics or whatever, starring your character to give them a fictional history, and then they get studio musicians to do the music,
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
right, and cross pollinate a little bit. So that was the plan, and so they said they wanted to launch it with a half-hour animated special. And for some reason, they had a timing problem. There was a certain window they needed, and so they needed it in a tremendous hurry. They said, Can you get us a story written for a half-hour animated special?" I said, I mean, like they wanted it like over a weekend, I mean, and I thought, well, the best guy is Archie Goodwin. He's not going to do this over a weekend. They said, "Will you get Harlan Ellison?" I said, "Yeah, if we want it next year." I said, so I'm trying to figure, and either I didn't think the people were qualified, or I just they weren't available, and so I thought, well, I have to do it myself. There's nobody else. I'll either be the hero or I'll be the goat. And so I wrote it. It's called New York, New York, or A Tale of Two Cities. And yes, and Donna Summers, the queen of Upper Hatton, and Cher is the queen of Lower Hatton. And of course, they're at war. And the whole thing is a nice complex plot. And Rodney Dangerfield actually plays three roles. I might have had to change this name, but I loved the name, so I used it for the story. He was a law firm called Cheatham, Dewey, and Howe. Um, and so anyway, and he's actually fomenting the war, and he's got Robin Williams was the romantic lead, the male romantic lead, and the Dazzler was the female romantic lead, and there was other superheroes in there. So I wrote this thing, and because they wanted voice parts for everybody they had under contract. That's
Wow.
why all those characters are in there.
Uh-huh.
And so like Lenny and Squee are the court jesters who aren't funny at all until they meet each other, and together they're funny. Stuff like that. Anyway, so I wrote this story, and the meeting was called, and the Casablanca guys are sitting there, not Neil Bogart, but high executives. And the guy taps his finger on my script, and he says, "This is not a half-hour animated special." And I'm like, "Damn it." And he said, "This is a feature film." I said, "Really? Okay, sure. Yeah, it's a feature film. Yeah, I meant that, And so all right. So then my intrepid business affairs VP, Alice Donenfeld, genius, she goes to the Cannes Film Festival. And this is right after that movie 10 with Bo Derek was such a
Mhm.
huge monster hit. And at
Right.
that point, Bo Derek was the hottest name in Hollywood. Everyone wanted to do Bo Derek's next movie. All right. Alice somehow works her way in and gets to have a meeting with Bo Derek. I
Hmm.
mean, nobody had it, but she got it done. She got in there somehow. Bo read my treatment on the spot, and she agreed to become attached. She wanted to play the Dazzler, so she agreed to an attachment right there. There's a cover of People magazine that has Bo Derek walking towards you, and beside her is her husband, John Derek. On the other side was Alice Donenfeld, but they cut her out of the picture. Um, and if you look closely in John Derek's hands, is a stack of Marvel comics. That's right after that meeting, right?
Wow.
And so anyway, for 2 weeks, we had the world by the tail. We had a
Yeah.
bidding war. All the big studios in Hollywood were bidding for our movie because they wanted Bo Derek's next movie. And then Bo amended her attachment agreement to say that her husband, John Derek, had to direct it. Now, John was kind of a failed director. He was famously late, over budget, and not very good. All right, and so his career had kind of crashed and burned. And so as soon as she said that, all the studios pulled out. Nobody wanted John Derek. They don't even to get Bo. And so uh, years later, it took her a couple of years, but she finally got somebody to agree to that, and they did a Tarzan movie, and
Yep.
it was late, over budget, and bad, and it basically ended both of their careers. So, anyway, so that close, but
Wow.
just didn't happen.
We are heading to the end of our time here. Let me
I
ask
know
you.
I talk too much. I'm sorry.
Oh,
No,
no.
this is why we are doing this, is to hear you talk.
Yeah.
I'm always curious when we have guests. I always ask them this: do you have a personal collection still?
I wouldn't call it a collection. I've got a lot of comics and stuff here, but I haven't, been real. I mean, I read them all the time. I use them for reference, and so it's kind of a working files, I guess. But no, I mean, I love comics, and I have a lot because they do accumulate if you're on the comp list.
That's
And but I also have given away so many. I mean, every time a kid comes over or something like that, I make sure they leave with some comics, Um, or when my friend Debbie, when she's going to see and sometimes I go with her to see her great nieces and nephew, and always take them something. And the older comics are good because like some of the stuff today you don't want to show young kids.
No, you don't want to drop a copy of
I
Emma
mean,
Frost.
yeah, probably won't hurt them, but their parents would like it.
yeah.
Well, let me
So,
let me
anyway,
wrap this up and let you go by giving you a little story. There's an 18-year-old guy, kid, just out of high school, doesn't know what he wants to do. He knows he wants to be creative in some way, whether it's comics or music. He's walking around Mid Ohio Con in Mansfield, Ohio in 1988. And in the hallway is a really tall Jim Shooter by himself wandering the halls.
yeah,
This
lost probably.
18-year-old, yeah, I stopped and talked to you, asked you a bunch of questions just like today. You took 20 to 25 minutes just talking to me and encouraging me. And I never, ever, ever forgot that, Jim. And I would
Well,
have never imagined my life today here in LA, working where I work and doing what I do without that conversation. So
well,
thank you.
very happy to hear that, and I can explain. We're all fans. We're all fans, and it's like it's as much fun for me as it is for somebody who doesn't have all the inside story. I mean, we all love this stuff, and you find someone else who loves it, and hey, we're in the club, and that's I go to these conventions all the time. Everybody in the building's a fan. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter which side of the table you're on. That's why you all get along so well.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for joining us today. Everybody, Richard, any last words from you? I think you're all set. You got all your legion stuff out of you.
I got my Legion. Yeah, I got that
All right.
done. Thank you so much. You are the foundation of my childhood.
me,
Your
me and
story,
some of the best people on earth,
yeah,
But
Right.
absolutely.
anyway, thank you guys.
Any appearances or anything you want to promote?
I'm going to be at, uh, let's see, I'm going to be at the Fan Expo in Cleveland next weekend.
Richard, that's where Richard
And,
Oh,
is.
yeah.
and then I'm going to be at MegaCon like the next weekend. So it's like they're both long cons. So I'm home for one day and then I'm
Oh,
on the road again. So got that, and there's a whole bunch of other ones coming up, but I really can't remember exactly where I'm going to be. I know I'm going to be in Roanoke again at the Nova Con in Washington. I don't remember when they are. And I'm going to be at this nice guy named Mike Federale has a bunch of conventions around the country. He's got Savannah, um, Charleston. He's got one in Massachusetts, Springfield, I think. And he puts on a great show. They're not huge, but they're nice. They're big enough and they're busy and he draws a lot of people and they
Great.
love it. So
All right,
yeah,
everybody knows how Google works, so Google Jim Shooter and convention, and I'm sure you can get a nice little
yeah.
list there. Thanks again. We really appreciate it.
My
Yes,
pleasure,
thank you so
guys.
much.
Anytime. If you want, to new list of questions, I'm ready.
Uh-oh, you're
Uh-oh.
screwed now. Uh, Richard, it finally happened, didn't it?
Dude, I have to give you props for getting that set up. This has been an amazing day. The man is amazing as well. So thanks again for making one of my bucket list things happen.
I gotta thank Jim because this was literally months in the making. We first started doing that email dance, I think, in November of last year, and uh, for his age, the man is extremely busy. I look at that and I'm jealous, and I want to be that way. It keeps you young. So for him to take the time and spend with us, when two people that he doesn't know from Adam to be on a podcast, a little silly comic book podcast. I mean, that just shows you how great of a guy he is. So again, we appreciate you, Jim Shooter. Thank you very
Absolutely.
much.
Thank you very much.
Uh, let's move on to our all shooter all day episode with our underrated books of the week. Richard, start us off. You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, my underrated book of the week is Dazzler #1 from 1980. This is a book that has been long maligned. It is the first. I just doing my research for the show found out this factoid. It's the first direct only issue from a major publisher,
You
and
didn't know that?
did not know that. Jim Shooter was the editor in chief at the time, and he marketed this to specialty shops as opposed to the normal newsstand. And later issues came out on the newsstand as well, but this was the first direct only issue that a major publisher put out.
I'm going to stop you because I think there is controversy here over
Oh, yeah.
that. I believe DC Comics had a Superboy Spectacular that was direct only. Uh, there's a little part of the back of my brain saying that came first, and just a lot of people don't know about it. But, for the sake of argument and the underrated book of the week and Jim Shooter, let's just say this is the first one. Go for it.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Dazzler is a superhero who uses sound to make light. Um, Big disco star at the time when disco was still around when this
In
book came out.
1980? I don't
And
know.
I think it was the tail end of disco.
I think you're right. Funky Town by Lip Sync was number one in 1980, so that counts.
There you go, and of course you would know that.
Mhm.
This book is a dollar bin special. I mean, you can find this book all day and all night in the inexpensive parts of people's long boxes. It never has had a strong value, but I think it's still a cool character. Um, it's also important as the pivotal change from a newsstand only business that comics book were for decades to something to a more specialty market. And I think it's an important book because of that. Not an expensive book, a 9/8 last sold for $150, and I wouldn't pay a penny more than that for it right now. But you never know. I mean, like I said, I think this book is important from a historical standpoint.
There is no newsstand version, so if anybody ever tries to sell you a newsstand version, they took a UPC and pasted it on with some Elmer's or something. There is, however, Richard, an error version of this book. Are you aware of that?
I am aware that there is an error version.
It is missing the color plate on a few of the pages inside. So flip through it. I think it's around the center fold. You'll see it. It's very noticeable. I've had a few copies of that error edition throughout the years and had them slabbed in 9.8s, and CGC does note it on the label and it commands a little bit of a premium.
Mhm. But still, I wouldn't pay a lot for this book.
You leave Allison Blair alone.
I know. I'm sorry. It's
She got beat up by Rogue.
It's this character is, she is part of the X-Men storyline. So if you read X-Men from the period, you will see her pop up. Um, but in the long and the short of it is, I don't really see a huge MCU presence for her in the future.
She fought Doctor Doom. She was the Herald of Galactus.
So was Aunt May.
I know. It's the magic of the what if multiverse, isn't it?
Yeah.
Golden Oli and Dazzler, the Heralds of Galactus. All right, let me move on to my underrated book, plural, of the week. In this all shooter all the time episode, it is Harbinger, issues 1 through 9. Probably my favorite title from Valiant Comics in that initial run of just the classic Valiant titles. Created and written by Jim Troubleshooter, this run lays the groundwork for a lot of the Valiant universe, introducing Pete Stanchek and the Harbinger Foundation. It also helped kick off the gimmick craze in comics throughout the 90s when everything had a gimmick. The issues 1 through 6 had a coupon that you could clip out and redeem for a mail order only copy of Harbinger Zero. I had stacks of this book because although it was very low ordered and very in demand, the comic shop I was helping manage at the time, Adventure Comics in Monterey, California, and Salinas, California for the second location, uh, ordered really heavily on Valiants, and they didn't sell, and they sat. And I think I've told this story on the podcast a billion times when I took basically a long box of Valiant #1s, all various titles, home to Cleveland when I moved back to Cleveland in 1992, and I traded a whole bunch of them for an Avengers 4. Probably a smart move in retrospect. But
Do
I
you
tell you
still
that
have that
story.
Avengers 4?
I don't have that Avengers 4, but I have an Avengers 4. How's that?
That's good.
I had multiples of 1 through 6, so I had no problem clipping a coupon from each of them and sending it in. And I got my Harbinger Zero, I think a year and a half later. I think it took forever. Shooter had left the company at that point. It was written by David Lapham, and yeah, it was crazy. As far as Harbinger #1, a 90-day average for a CGC 9.8 is $743. Sounds impressive, but that is down from a high of $1,043 last year. Now, I have a little 9.6 sitting over here in my box. That's very affordable. It'll cost you around $180. So, if you really want a 9.8 and you're willing to plunk down an extra, let's do some math here. Beep, 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 boop, boop, $500 and 550. God bless you. I'm happy with my 9.6.
That's typically my attitude anymore. 9.6 is good enough.
All right, that is going to wrap it up for this episode. Again, thank you very much, Jim Shooter. Thank you for everybody who submitted questions through Instagram. And thank you, Richard.
Well, thank you, John, for getting it all set up.
All right, we will catch you next time.
Everybody, stay safe.